I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I've been walking around here for the last 20 minutes, plugged in, ready to go. I checked my little button. It says on. I checked it. And I walked out just before I started, pulled that plug out, even though the button was on. I can't believe I'd done that. Such a rookie error. However, if it gave you a laugh, then I'm happy. I just looked down and saw these 27, 28 things, all these chats. Yeah, all right. Enjoy it. I just did that just to make sure you were listening. What I said is, this is the last webinar of 2020, and we made it, thankfully, and it's all focused on Q4. If something isn't helping you move a deal forward or get it out of the way so you can focus on what matters, then who has time for that? That's what this is all about. Not going to spend any time on introductions, just to say what's important is that I put together a list of 7. These are my favorites. It's not necessarily an exhaustive list. It's just what, in my experience, top of mind tools, tactics, methods, whatever you want to call them, that will help move a deal forward or get it out of the way. What I would say to you is that they're not in any particular order, certainly not in order of importance. And as you listen, as we go through this, if you can pick out 1 or 2 that are going to make an appreciable difference to you, then that's a great thing. That's a result. You're certain, not all 7 by any stretch are going to be relevant to everybody, not a chance. It depends on so many different circumstances that you're involved in, what's going to work for you. However, if it sparks an idea, or you say, you know what, I wouldn't use it exactly that way, but it might help this way, do that. It's just to inspire ideas, give you some takeaways that you can put into practice that will help move deals forward or get them out of the way. That's it. If there are something that you want to put in chat as we go through it, I will check it every now and again when I see all those. There you go. Thank you. Better now. It does help if you plug it in, because not everybody's a lip reader. We're going to just jump straight into this, and as I said, they're not in order of importance. I'm going to start with the first one. I call this push the deal out. And essentially what this is that you look at your pipeline, look at your top 10 deals, or it could be your top 5, whatever's relevant. And where, for most people coming into Q4 end of year, your prospects have been conditioned to expect that that's the time of year that you need the deal, so therefore they're going to get discounts. And they will push you up. Look, I don't have to tell you, you've seen this. If you've been in sales at all a wet week, you've seen this. And so in order to counter that, what you can do, again, context is everything, but you can call up some of your prospects and say, hey, John, and I'll just use that term generically for prospects. Hey, John, listen, as you know, next month is our end of year, and it's our busiest month, frankly, and with all of the work we've gone on, I don't know that I'm going to be able to give everything my best attention. Was just looking at what we're doing with you currently, and I wondered, is there any way we could push that out by a month or 2? Would that be a problem for you? And then you shut up and see what happens. Because you're not saying, of course you don't want it to slip, but by artificially pushing it out with the prospect, there's only 1 or 2 ways a prospect can respond to that. They can either go, yeah, no problem, push it out. We don't need it till March or April time anyway. Or they'll say, no, we absolutely have this. Everything's lined up, systems are ready to go, budgets are in place, we need this by next month. Either way, you've got something valuable. If it's the latter and they're telling you we need this, that tells you it changes the leverage. Now they need it. If they're telling you that, yeah, no problem, this thing can slip, guess what? It's going to slip. It doesn't make a difference. They'll take all the concessions that you give. They'll use the end of year to extract all the concessions. Doesn't make a difference what time limits you put on that. They're going to come back a month or 2 later and look for the exact same conditions, and you know what you do, you're going to give it. Or whoever's going to replace you when you move to a different job is going to give it. And therefore they'll have used it to squeeze concessions, but you don't get what you need. So artificially pushing it out is a really good tactic. You can also, by the way, there's a sister version of this, whereby you can, rather than push the deal out, you can, and by the way, I thought of this because this is true in many, certainly high-tech organizations, whereby end of year, people know that the following year they're going to move into a different role or at least be given a different territory. And so you can say to a prospect, look, As you know, it's our busiest time of year, going to be working a lot of deals, and I'm going to be moving into a different role. So once the end of January, let's say that's the end of January comes, I'm going to be moving on. I don't want to leave this open for somebody else to come in and have to relearn everything and waste your time. Does it make sense to spend time on it now to get it over the line, or should we leave it for somebody new coming in? And in essence, you're doing the same thing as because most people don't want to have somebody else pick up the pieces if it's important to them and they want to get that in place over the next couple of months. So just using that you're changing role and you don't want to leave them in the lurch. Therefore, you want to make sure that everything is tidy and closed off. And in essence, you're changing the story away from we need this because I've forecasted it and I need to close it at the end of the year to I need to help you because I'm moving on. So they're different, but they come from the same stable in terms of turning the tables on the prospect, making it feel like you're doing them a favor. And just to finish off on the point I said earlier about artificially pushing out a deal, don't worry if they turn around and say, well, you mean you can't do it by the end of the month? No, that's not what I mean at all. I just want to talk to the people who is important that it's closed by next month, so therefore I can give them my full attention, and anything else, get it out of the way. That's all. I'm putting you down on the list of has to be done by next month. So don't worry about getting caught on that if they call you and say, look, are you saying you can't support us? No, that's exactly why I'm calling you. I want to make sure that I do support you. That's the first one, is to artificially push out the deal. Second one I have leverages that technique but puts it into a structure, a process, and a conversation that happens earlier in the process. At this stage in Q4, certainly if it's December, and probably if it's end of January, if it's the end of your Q4, you should already have a close plan. Now, I've seen many close plans over the years, and typically what happens is the salesperson comes back to their desk and they work on a close plan. They put all the things in place that need to happen, and they may put dates beside it and who owns the action, etc. And then they send it to the prospect, and of course what happens is it gets ignored and nobody's looking at it. A close plan, for it to be effective, has to be based on a conversation. You're co-building a map, a mutual action plan with your prospect, and that's the important word, co-building. So it's a conversation where you have your prospect on the phone or on a Skype call or a Zoom call, and hey John, listen, the first step, by the way, is just to summarize where you are. You summarize the pain, what you've learned during discovery in terms of what they're trying to achieve. So John, what you've told me is you want to make sure that all your systems are consolidated and everybody has access, no matter where they are, to the systems to drive efficiencies and lower cost. Did I understand that correctly? Yeah, you did. Yeah, right. And that we talked about an investment in the range of 200,000. And I know you said to me that was probably a little bit on the high side, but you could live with it if we could get it up and running in time and that it delivered on the value that we promised. And that's all you're doing is just stage one, it's just recapping on that. Step two of the process then is where you take your salesperson's hat off. Now, that's an important step as well because it changes the tone of the conversation. And it might sound something like, John, can I take my salesperson's hat off for a moment and put my project manager's hat on? I used to work as a project manager years ago, and what I learned when it comes to large scale projects, that the devil really is in the detail. And what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is just kind of step through the elements of what needs to happen in order to get this up and running. They'll never say no to that request. So that just do is take your salesperson's hat off and put your project manager's hat on. Now, project managers do 5 things. That's all you need to remember, are these 5 things. And those of you who've done any work with me before know that these are really, think about upfront contract, but in a context of a close plan. So you have a goal. That's one thing that obviously a project manager is focused on. They're focused on the milestones. What are the major elements that need to be in place in order to achieve that goal? They're focused on the actions, the roles and responsibilities, the actions, so the tasks, the milestones, tasks, roles and responsibilities, and risks and assumptions. Now, a conversation based around those 5 elements is a very, very powerful conversation. And it is a conversation, so you're saying to a prospect, now, let's start with the first one, goal. Hey, John, when do you want to have this up and running by, and whoever you decide to do business with gone out of your hair? Now notice that what we're focused on here is not when do we sign contracts or when you want it closed by, but when does the customer, the prospect, want to have the system up and running and all done and dusted and they're ready to move on. Their go live date, essentially, that's it. Whatever they give you, test it. That's really important. So let's say, well, look, I need to have everything up and running by 15th of March. The testing is like the last one where you artificially put it out and you say, well, can I ask you, John, if that were to slip by a month or two, would that be an issue? There's only one or two answers to that. One will be, yeah, it's a problem, or the other one is, yeah, we could live with it. If they can live with it, if it can slip, it will slip. That's the Murphy's Law of sales. If they come back and say, no, it can't slip. Oh, curious, why is that? And whatever they give you will tell you why that can't slip. Now, when you have that, that's a powerful start, because you know that it can't slip. Maybe budgets are disappearing. Maybe they have promised a go live date to somebody else and there's penalties attached. Maybe that person's moving on to a different job. There's so many reasons why that can't slip. You've got to know that. That's the next stage, is that you artificially put it out. Or you test it, in other words. The next stage we talked about were the milestones. And the milestones in most projects are, again, I can't tell you what yours are, but here's some generic ones. Maybe acceptance testing. That's a phase that if you're certainly implementing a technical project, any kind of engineering project, it would have to go through to be accepted and signed off. So that would be a milestone. Contracts being signed would be a milestone, and there's typically, again, depending on how big the project is, there's a process around that. Sometimes there's an investment committee things need to go to, and they only meet on a certain time. So understanding how that works is important. There may be other milestones as well. Maybe there's a pilot, which is kind of similar to sign off, but not always the same. What else? Maybe just pop into chat for your own sake, just so we can share it with the group. What are some of the other key milestones we have? So we have contracts. That would be maybe as part of the procurement process, that there's elements that need to go through there. Then there's obviously the legal side of things that contracts would have to go through as well. So those are two different processes, even though we call them contracts. One is working with procurement, one was working with legal. There may be more in your particular business, and I said if you can think of, just pop them in the chat and I'll share them with the group. But there are certainly major milestones. And the key thing is what we're doing is now we're working backwards. So the prospect says, I need it to be up and running by the 15th of March. And you say, okay, well look, how long do we need to set aside for acceptance testing? Typically, and again, you can lead and you can help and say, look, typically for an installation this size, it'd normally be about a 2-week process. Does that sound fair to you? And you're all the time checking. You're either getting the information from them or presenting them with what typically happens and just checking. So if they say, yeah, 2 weeks sounds fine. They say, well, look, that brings us back to the start of March. They say, now, of course, we need to go through the contracts process in terms of giving both our legal teams time with the contracts. How long would that take typically in your organization? Again, let's say they say a week or 2 weeks. You say, well, that sounds okay. And now you just subtract it. And all you're doing with the milestones is working backwards all the time to the various milestones to figure out when contracts need to be, where they need to give the green light to get that go ahead. And what you'll find very often is you're up against the buffers very, very quickly, particularly when you bring into account things like holidays, for example. We've got Christmas holidays, depending on what part of the world you're in. And again, there may be, again, depending on what part of the world you're in, different holidays that people have that have to be factored in. But what you'll find very quickly is that you're now trying to help them protect their go live date. They've told you this date is important, and you're trying to say, look, I want to make sure that we make this for, and help you achieve your goal. And you're working backwards. And then you just bring in the who needs to do what. There's the tasks and roles, responsibilities. It's kind of just nothing more than an action plan with dates and standard stuff, right? And then risks and assumptions. What could go wrong? Well, what if somebody gets sick? Or what if it takes longer to get contracts signed off than we expected? What happens from an acceptance testing? Maybe there's something there. You just build in some time in order to take account for the factor that stuff happens. And essentially, you're just having that conversation with a prospect. Generally, my experience is it takes no more than maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes to have that. And then what you have is you have you've documented all this, you write it up and you send it back to your prospect and just get him to okay it. If you really want to pull a power move on it, what you can do is you can certainly get them to sign it. You can say, look, I know your go live date is 15th of March is important to you. And of course, as we know, this is our busiest time of year. I want to make sure that I have acquired internal resources, the best engineers that we have, to make sure that we help you reach that goal. In order to secure that, when I go back to my boss, the first thing she's going to ask me is, do we have a letter of intent? So you can use that as an excuse to get your close plan, your mutual action plan, signed off. It's not a contract. They're not saying, I'm going to spend this money with you. They're just saying, yeah, it's a letter of intent or a memorandum of understanding, nothing more than that. But just getting them to sign that is another power move as well that just kicks it up a notch. You've got that, you've got a very forecastable deal. So that was my number 2 mutual action plan. Third one is to apply the law of scarcity. I came across this, it's not my idea at all. I came across this was a very senior director. What have we got here? Sorry, I just wanted to just check in on the chat so I don't leave them out as we go along. Productions, there we go. Sorry, thank you very much, James. Production schedules, lead times can be used to get leverage. Great idea. Also good to have an alternative option solution of PO placement slips, placement slips, I should say. Absolutely, James, spot on. That's exactly, and they're all the kind of the risks and assumptions we need to put in place because that stuff happens. And we've all been in situations where we're kind of sweating, waiting on that email to come in, and it's no fun, and we want to avoid that. So building in that kind of time, it just makes sense. Remember, you have a common goal here with your prospect to help them achieve their goal, not the other way around, right? And that turning the table does matter. So thanks for that, James. Now, this one on the law of scarcity was it was a senior director in, I just say it was a big database company. And what this guy used to do was, he was a manager of managers, so a senior guy. And as the big deals would coming into the Q4, he would personally intervene and he'd get his reps to come, with their top 2 or 3 deals. And he would call up the lead, if you like, for the prospect lead, and say that, usually at this stage there's negotiations going on and they've been pushed to discount. And what this guy, let's just call him Peter. And what Peter would say, he says, look, John again, generic prospect. I can't give you any more discount on this. This is as far as I can go. However, I respect that you want to get this up and running quickly and that we can move forward and get on with other things. He said, I have this marketing budget that, frankly, I'm not going to spend this year. And it's one of those use it or lose it. I'm not going to get it next year unless I use it this year. So what I can do is I can offset that marketing budget against the project and give it as a line item discount in the thing. But it's one marketing budget and I'm giving you first refusal on it. Now, I remember asking him after he shared this with the room, I said, is that true? Was it your marketing budget? And the guy laughed and he said, no, he said, it was just a discount. But he says, by making it a marketing budget, I've only got one of those. And I can give it to you or I can give it to you. But I can't give it to both of you. Whereas, and prospects know this, a discount, I can give everybody a 10% discount. Hey, no problem. But if I've got a marketing budget that represents 10% in value, for example, I can only give that once. And therefore, it creates a sense of urgency that, look, I'm giving you first refusal. And if you don't want to go ahead with it, that's okay. But I do need to offer it to somebody else. And it also tests, because if they're not willing to take that up, that says something else, there's something else missing. I mean, why wouldn't you take that up? And of course, because it wasn't a real marketing budget, it was just a discount, he was able to go along to the next one and do the exact same thing. So it just got people to take action and not push deals right up to the very last moment. It got them to take that action earlier. So net in terms of margin, it didn't make a difference. It just meant they could get a better night's sleep and not be sweating it out in the last few days of the quarter. So I thought that was a nice one in terms of creating that sense of scarcity. That was number 3. Number 4 is to quantify the cost of delay. Now, hopefully, in the pain step in your discovery, you are quantifying the cost of the pain. In other words, what additional revenue are they going to be able to capture based on buying what you sell, or what cost savings are they going to be able to realize by buying what you sell? Either way, it should be quantified. And if you can quantify that as an overall value, then it's relatively straightforward to say, well, look, for every week of delay, here's what the cost is. And if it works out that the cost of delay is going to cost them more than any benefit they might eke out or squeeze out of the system by pushing you a little bit further, is going to be lost. It just doesn't make sense. And therefore, by having that, it just gives you another source of leverage in having those conversations with your prospect to create that sense of urgency and to move it on. And of course, it can be combined. You can push out a deal, but also look at quantified cost of pain as well, because if you're pushing out a deal and for every day it's costing them X amount of money, then it's every day it gets pushed out, it's very obvious. So again, as we go through these, you can combine some of these together to make it even more powerful and to give you more leverage. But having that is an important source as well of leverage. All right, that was 4, quantify the cost of delay. The next one is to detach from the outcome. This is very different. This is not something you give or do. This is something you give off. And the problem is, and it's true of some of these techniques as well, is that if you're attached to the outcome, if you need this deal, if you're shy of your quota and the pressure's on, it's very hard to say, turn around to a prospect and say, hey, listen, why don't we just push it out by a couple of months? You want to be one hell of an actor to be able to do that. And so it's about getting into a state of mind. Some of you will have heard me say before, I'm financially independent and I don't get that was a Freudian slip. So if I'm financially independent, I don't need the business. And so you detach yourself from the outcome. Now, you do have to attach yourself to something, and that's the process. So the process is, I want to do the best job possible of discovery. I want to have a comfortable conversation around money. I want to identify the decision-making process. I want to put a mutual action plan in place. No question. And I attach myself to doing the best job possible I can at each one of those stages. But what I need to do is detach myself from any particular outcome, because I have no control. You have no control over whether your prospect decides to do business with you or not. All you have control over is what you do leading up to that point. So if you have no control over it, why attach your ego and your emotions to that? It's only going to cause you grief. It's easier said than done. And it does, I mean, David Sandler once said that selling is a Broadway show put on by a psychiatrist, and it's so true. There is acting involved in this. From the get-go, you pick up a phone to call a stranger to talk about widgets, you're acting. Because if you weren't acting, you'd be drinking coffee and having a beer with your mates or whatever, because who wants to do that? So you're playing a role from the get-go. However, in this, your role is to be detached. And it's what great actors are doing, is that when they inhabit that role, it doesn't make a difference what's happening in their own personal lives. In that moment, they're on stage. They are the role. And that's what I want you to imagine, is that you got 10 million euros of your own personal money in your own personal bank account. You'll know what to do every single time. And if somebody keeps pushing you and saying, or when I say pushing you, not committing to anything and trying to push you up against deadlines. If you had 10 million in your own bank account, you wouldn't have a problem with that situation. You'd give that off. Say, look, if you don't want to close, it's okay. You know, there's quite a number of other people I need to attend to. Not those words, it sounds a bit arrogant, but like that's what you'd give off, is I said, look, it's okay. There's plenty of others. I can go over here and help. And that in itself is what people pick up and believe. So you've got to believe it first. And it is that kind of part of it is, getting into that mantra before you pick up the phone, before you go on the call is, look, I'm financially independent. I don't need a business. I don't need their business. I've got 10 million in the bank. I don't need this. It's only momentarily. Once the call is over, you can go back to crying in the corner and sweating it out if you want to. But just in that moment, you're financially independent. You don't need a business. It'll make all the difference in the world. I promise. That was number 5. Okay, number 6. Have a mobile defense plan. And I'm going to just go to 7 for a second, which is called a close the file. I'm going to deal with both of those separately. So I'm going to talk first of all about this one here. Let's go to, the mobile defense plan. So no, that's wrong. Here is what we want to do. Defense line 1. So here's what the mobile defense plan is. It's a 3-step process by which you're going to hold the line on price. The first, and the reason for this is that most people tend to be one-trick ponies when it comes to dealing with price pressure. They get and there's any number of moves, the flinch. How much? You expect me to, what, how much? Right, that's the flinch, right? There is higher authority that they want to deal with somebody else, or they'll escalate it up the line if they're not getting what they want from you, or they'll play good cop, bad cop, or they'll do the hot potato, which is, I'd love to move forward with this, but our budgets are under real pressure. COVID. They'll throw in the COVID. I had it yesterday on a call. It's coming. He said, well, this year with COVID. And the guy says to me, he says, so what can you do around price? And I said, I operate a zero discount policy. That was it. Conversation over. And that's the thing. You have to have a 3-step plan. So it means that when you come under price pressure, you need to know where to go, what tactic you're going to use, what you're going to say. If you're dealing with procurement, you're dealing with a savvy negotiator, they're not going to give up just because you've offered up a first line of defense. They're going to keep pushing. So we need a different strategy. We need a second line of defense, which means we operate from a different place. And we need to know in advance what to do, because that won't come to you in the moment. And then again, you're dealing with a good negotiator. They're going to keep putting pressure on you. And you need to know what your third line of defense is. What are you going to do differently in the third line than you did in the second line, and so on. And so that's what I'm going to do, is just very quickly step through those 3 lines of defense. The first one is, I had it back up there, let me get back up again, is you give nothing but a reward and reassurance. Now there are variances on this, which I'll kind of give you a hint of. So the reward and reassurance is, just you smile and you say, look, John, I knew you were going to be a tough negotiator. I want to just assure you that based on the size of the deal we have right now on the table, you're getting the best deal possible. That's all it is. It's just the reward is a compliment or a stroke. You just, you say, look, I knew you were going to be a tough negotiator. Of course, they see themselves as tough negotiators. So inside they're going, yes, I am. Look, I just want to assure you, you're getting the best deal possible for what we have on the table right now. Now, here's the thing. For most people in an organization, sometimes that's just enough. Sometimes look, I had to ask. That's not going to stop a good buyer. It's not. They're going to put pressure on, but you have to still do it, because if you just cave in the first and you offer up a discount, few things happen. First of all, what gets rewarded gets repeated. So if I cave in and give a discount, guess what? They're going to come after more and more and expect it and be pissed off if they don't get it. Secondly, I think, just from a point of view of respect, that people who are good at negotiation, they study it, they practice it, they have a lot of practice. And they respect somebody else who's good at it as well. It's like a chess game. If you've ever played chess, and imagine a game A, and you're against an opponent who's not any good, and 5 or 6 moves, this game is over. Checkmate, done and dusted. That's game A. Game B is different. Now you're up against somebody who knows how to play. This game is not over in 5 minutes. This game goes on for hours, and there's mutual respect for the moves you're making. It forces you to think and defend your position, and there's repartee and a bit of banter that's going on. Which game do you enjoy the most? B, of course. It's like that in negotiation, that when you're up against a player, somebody who's a skilled opponent, they will respect and admire somebody who's also skilled, who doesn't roll over at the first push. That's why you have to have that first line of defense. Now, I said the reward and reassurance, the one I used yesterday, it was the first time I thought about it, was I went with something that was probably less, in terms of atmosphere and tone, it was less warm. It was, look, I have a zero discount policy. I said, in fact, I said the first thing, I said, if I give a discount, I said, is you're going to have to sack me. He kind of looked at me, what do you mean? I said, well, look, I said, you guys, you've told me this. Your sales guys are leaving millions on the table every year by giving away unnecessary discounts. And you want me to come in and spread that disease around your organization? I said, if I did that, the first thing you'd do is sack me. That was the end of the conversation. Now, I know not everybody can use that. That's why I don't go into it. But certainly, I knew what the first line had to be. And he just gave up, by the way. And this was a procurement person. So, second line of defense. And I think that was partly also because I gave a rationale which was very hard to counter. It wasn't something that he probably came up against with before. But that's the first line. Second line of defense is different. Second line of defense is where we arm wrestle. And the arm wrestling is... the arm wrestling is really where you're using tactic and counter tactic. I'll give you an example of what I mean by tactic and counter tactic. So, for example, there's many of these. I've just picked three off the top of my head. I obviously prepared it earlier. Our budgets have been cut, right? When you hear that, how do you respond? You need to know that. You absolutely have to have that. Mine is, well, look, maybe we ought to wait until they're in better shape and revisit this next year. That's it. Now, if you've done your work right in the pain step and the organization has a business case and there's a compelling reason to do something and your prospects are committed to doing something, that's an easy one. They're not going to want to wait till next year. And your procurement person, you've just neutralized any power leverage that they have in this argument that their budgets have been cut. See, that's their problem, not yours. You've got the solution. They need to come up with the money. So that's why it's called the hot potato. It's like, my budgets have been cut. This is the procurement person. My budget has been cut. Here you go. Now it's your problem. And you're kind of going, not my problem, mate. Maybe we ought to wait. And you just throw the potato back where it belongs with the prospect. And so that's again, don't worry about the words. Essentially is figure out what you're doing. You're throwing it back. You're not taking responsibility for their hot potato, for their mess. Your competition is cheaper. There's lots of different answers to that one as well, depending on the context. It could be as simple as, and, right? You could, again, I'm not suggesting you do that, could come across a little bit aggressive. You said, competition is cheaper. Well, look, does the fact that we're more expensive means you'd be reluctant to proceed? Again, you throw it back to the prospect. You say, look, or you could go to well, let me ask you this. Are you looking for cheapest? Well, very few people will say yes, but if they do, you say, look, that kind of rules us out because I've been doing this job a long time and we're never cheapest. Let me ask you this. What would you need to get here from us for you to feel comfortable paying more? And not just more than cheapest, but probably more than anybody else. And now you've reframed and refocused the conversation around value rather than around a race to the bottom in terms of price. And there are others, but we don't have time to go into all of them. You need to do better. That's a classic one where they just keep throwing it back to you, keep going back until you get to a point where you throw your hands up in the air and you go, I can't do anymore. I've done everything. There's nothing left to give. And then they go, okay, we'll talk so. And that's how that is. And you've got to really define what do better means. So when somebody says you need to do better, you just throw it back. You say, when you say better, what exactly does that mean? Or when you say better, could you be more specific? And then once you've got something more specific, then you can deal with it. You can say, if I had this, this, and this, you can say, well, look, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. Let's pretend I couldn't do that. What would happen next? Or, sorry, let me reverse that. Let's pretend I couldn't do that. What then? And if they say to you, well, look, if you can't meet us there, then it's probably over. Then you can always say, well, look, then I won't do that, right? Or if you say, when you do, can you do better, and you turn that into some specifics, then it's, let's say I can do that, what would happen next? And if what happens next isn't clear and uncertain in its terms, you've got more work to do. If it's, what happens next is, well, look, we'd review it. That's no good. Review means, and you tie that down. Commitment, commitment, commitment. That's the key thing. Not just Q4, any time of the year, but specifically this time of the year. So again, you got to arm yourself. I did another session on negotiation where I dealt with more of these particular tactics. Go look at that. It's online, or send me a request and I'll send you a link to it. But certainly you've got to have your talk tracks down so that when you hear a tactic, any of these being used by a prospect, you're able to insight at subconscious. When I say subconscious, it's like it's 2 plus 2. You don't have to think about it. You kind of go, okay, that's a hot potato. Oh yeah, that's the flinch. That's higher authority. And you know where to take the conversation. You don't have to think about it. Because if you don't have that, it won't come to you when you're there. That's true for sure. Okay, that's what I wanted to cover on having mobile defense plan. The key thing there is to have multiple stages. And I'm recommending 3 because it's manageable. But in each one, the first one is you give nothing but a reward or a stroke of reassurance, nothing. Second one, you don't give anything either, except your arm wrestling. And so every time they ask, there's a counter to that. And then that's the second line. The third line is, I got too fancy with my slides because I was doing this in a different session, and they go up and down 3 times, so I'm just going to pass through that before I get to the third one, because I got fancy and I said I'll deal with each one in turn, but not today. No time, eh? Under pressure. So defense line 3, here we go. This is where we trade concessions. Now this is something that you have to have in advance. If you don't have it in advance, you're going to be toast. I know this. I remember the first time this hit me was I was working in Motorola at the time. I worked for the UK office, sales office, and because they didn't have any office in Ireland, there was Motorola factory where they made two-way radios for police and so on, and they made pagers. And I had a desk in there, but my desk was in the middle of the procurement team. So I would watch and listen to these guys on a daily basis and learn, first of all, inside out what procurement in a manufacturing environment was like, but also just the approach they took. And of course I made friends with lots of them. One of them was a good friend to this day, still is. He went away on a procurement course and he came back and he shared with me the manual. I was really curious when we went through it. And he showed me these worksheets that they had. They were 4 pages thick. And it was their planning document, what they would plan out before they went in to a negotiation with a vendor. And the detail they went into was just fascinating, scary actually, more than fascinating. In terms of questions they were anticipating, tough questions, how they would respond to them, concessions they were going to ask for. They also prepared concessions that they could give. And they looked at all their different sources of leverage that they had over the vendor. And so what I did with this, and again, it's not something I have right to hand right now, but I have it somewhere, is if anybody wants it, I created a counter document to this. So I looked at what procurement people would prepare, and I prepared a document that, one for one almost, that if they're preparing this, we need to prepare this. And I put that into a document format, happy to send it as a PDF to anybody who wants it. And it just looks at all the different sources of leverage that you can have from a sales perspective, but also looks at the tough questions that you can expect to get, how you're going to respond to them. But the key thing on this are the concessions. And what you do with that is very simple. You look at all the concessions that, non-price concessions that you can give that don't cost you very much, but are of high value to your customer. And you rank them in order from in terms of the ones that are least costly to the most value to your counterpart down. And any price concessions are, I would even say, don't be on the list, but if you have to, they're certainly at the bottom because they're highest cost to you. They're actually for certainly the people you're dealing with, the procurement people, for most of them, they're the least value. They don't benefit directly as a result of any kind of discount. However, and I know there are exceptions to that, however, then you have to look at the other side. What is it the prospect can give you that is high value to you but doesn't cost them any much. That might be introductions to other parts of the organization. It might be testimony, a video testimonial would be great. It might be extended terms. There's all sorts of things, and every business is different. You know that best. The key thing in this is that you have those lists prepared, and then you operate a strict quid pro quo policy, so that when under pressure, and you can say this if somebody's looking for a discount, I said, look, can't go to discount, but if you're open to it, what we can do is look at something that might be of more value to you than discounts. Most people will say yes, at least to that conversation. And then whatever they're getting from you, you could then, because you have it prepared, there's an equal and opposite ask. And you say, well, look, if I can make that happen, here's what I need from you in return. And that has a couple of things. First of all, it keeps the value equilibrium in place. You're not just giving unilateral concessions. Secondly, what it does is it conditions the prospect to know that every time they come looking for something, they have to come with a give as well. And that slows down the process. I don't mean slows down the process. That stops them coming back time and time and time again. What will happen is they'll go for the priority asks because they'll know that that's worth the give. But after that, what's the point? So that's really important as well. It's a quid pro quo. And then if you're going to do that, we give concessions in small, ever decreasing amounts. Because if, let's say, I'll keep it simple and say it is a price concession that you give a 5% discount. If you give another 5% discount, guess what they expect a third time? You're right, 5%. But if you go 5% and then down to say 2% or 1.78%, then there's an expectation that the next one will be less. And so we train our prospects, we condition them to what they're going to expect from us. And that's really important as well. And the third thing to take into account when you're giving concessions is to make it look like everyone hurts. It's like it's coming out of your own personal paycheck. Absolutely. This is again where the acting comes in. When you give it up and you say, you huff and you puff and just make it look like it's painful. Because that's what they believe. By the way, if you want to know more about this area of negotiation, go to a site called dobetterdeals.com, and there's a guy on there who writes for it called Joe Auer. And why it's important is he advises procurement people how to negotiate with salespeople. And one of the things he says is, never believe a salesperson when they tell you, that's all I can do. They don't believe your words. They believe what they experience, your tonality, and if you have body language in the game, maybe not at the moment so much, but you've got to communicate that, look, you're at the end of the line here, you're at the bottom of the barrel, there's nothing more you can do, you'd rather walk away. And your whole tonality is like defeated. That's what they believe. So your style is actually sometimes more important than substance when it comes to negotiating with a skilled player. That's the mobile defense plan, the 3 steps. 1, give nothing but a stroke of reinsurance. 2, arm wrestle, make it, you sweat it out, tactic to tactic, toe to toe. And the third one is then you get to trading concessions. By the time you get to that, you have your prospects' respect and you've already conditioned them how to work with you. That's going to be important, certainly in Q4 for those of you who are going to negotiate deals. They are the 6, and I said I had one more for you, which was called the, I call it Dear John. I've forgotten now what I've called it. It'll come to me in a second. I know I wrote it down here. There's another name. Anyway, it'll come to me. Essentially what it is it's a tactic used where you've had a conversation with a prospect in Q3, everything is looking good, you've done discovery, you've talked about money, you've identified how the decisions get made. You may even have hopefully a mutual action plan put in place, but for the most part, probably not. Certainly if you're going to get this. And what you'll have is particularly when procurement get involved, any kind of player is, they know you're most vulnerable at the end of Q4. So what they will do is they'll go silent. We've all had this. It's not only Q4, it happens at other times of the year as well, but especially in Q4, they go dead. They don't respond to your emails. I just remembered now what I called it. I called it close the file. They don't respond to your emails. They don't respond to your voicemails. Nada, nothing, nix, Rian. So what you've got to do is you've got to send them a message who basically kind of says we're walking away, but without saying it that way. And I've got an example of it here. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to very quickly flip this over. Let me turn this down because this is the real example that I had. I wrote to a guy a few years ago. It's just to give you an example of what it sounds like in the 4 stages. Again, I can send this to anybody who wants it. Let me just check. So I know there's a few Q&As coming in, guys, so I'm going to deal with those shortly. Let me just finish this and then I'll go look at anything and answer any questions that we have in there. There's a couple in the chat function as well that I'll get to. So just bear with me. This will take about 2 minutes. Many of you, if you've ever worked with me before, you've probably seen this anyway. No, that's not a one. Where? No, I did not want to do that. I'm going to have to read this out to you guys because I thought I had it flicked onto a screen. I'll put this up in the recording, by the way. So, hi Mark, a while back we talked about developing your staff in Dublin through ongoing reinforcement training, and it sounded like we might have a fit. It's been quite some time since we've spoken. I've had trouble reaching you by phone. So that's the first paragraph. It's very simple. It's just a case of recapping on where you've been to, or where you've been with them in terms of what you've covered, etc. My guesses were out of touch for one of 4 reasons. Your priorities, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to see, oh no I can't, I was going to cut and paste that and see if I could put it into the chat function. I may be able to do that before I head up. Hang on a second, see if, let me try this and just, it's worth it. Well, I think when I looked at this earlier, it wasn't, here we go. Dear John, have you. And so I'm going to open this and just pop, oh no, that won't do. I'm going to pop it into the chat function so you can see it there, but I'll finish it off. So my guesses were out of touch for one of 4 reasons. 1 is your priorities have changed. 2, it only sounded like a fit to me. 3, you've decided to go with another option, but you're too nice to break the bad news to me. 4, you are desperately trying to reach me, but you're trapped under a heavy object and you can't reach the phone. I consider it a personal favor if you'd let me know if the problem is one of these or something I didn't think of. Regards, Paul. P.S. If it is, here we go. I got it now, and I'm going to copy and paste that and just pop it into the chat function so everybody has that. If it's number 4, reply and I'll send help. So here we go. Let me just pop that in there, and you can do a cut and paste on that if you want. Now, what I would say on that, by the way, this is again, maybe if you've used this yourself, because you've been in a class with me and you've taken it and you've used it and you want to just pop in your experience with it. I've yet to have anybody come back to me and say they've had a bad experience. 99.9% of people come back and say it worked a treat. I've used it many times myself. It's really, really effective. Nobody can be offended by it. It's just very lighthearted. There's a bit of humor in it, but it's also, you're covering all your bases. The thing is, you know, the first one, your priorities have changed. That could have happened. It sounded like a fit to me. In other words, I got it wrong. 3, you decided to go with another option, but you're too nice to. Who can get mad with you for saying, but you're too nice to break the bad news for me? 4 is something else I didn't think of. You covered all your bases. You're desperately trapped under a heavy object and you're trying to get to the phone. You know, reply and I'll send help. It's very, very effective. And what it'll do is, if there's anybody hiding under a rock that wants to do business, needs to do business, but is playing a game, it smokes them out really, really quickly. If they don't come back to you and they play the game, it's probably not happening anyway. So here we go. Hi, Paul. I put it in the chat. Oh, hang on. Oh, I see what's wrong, guys. Hang on a second. I know what's wrong. It only went to panelists, which is only one, which is me. So I'm going to just copy and paste that again. And this time it's going to everybody. Thanks for that, by the way. I missed that one when I put it in. There we go. So everybody, you should see that one now come through. That's it. You got it? Great. Good stuff. Thanks, Nicholas. The key thing is, I've seen people really uncomfortable with you're trapped under a heavy object. If you want to change it a little bit, just make sure it has to be humorous, it has to be lighthearted. But you can, there's a great one in a company I was doing some work with recently, and this guy, he took it up to another level, and it's brilliant. He started to use little GIFs, and he had a GIF in his email, which was a guy trapped under a heavy object going, help, help. And it was humorous. It couldn't help but bring a smile to somebody's face. So as I said, take this as sheet music. You got to play it to your world. But just remember why it works is that you've covered all your bases. It's not accusing them of anything. It's lighthearted. It's basically saying, listen, I'm okay if it's not happening. Just, I consider it a personal favor if you could let me know. consider why it works, and make sure those elements are, particularly when sometimes people use it and they translate it into different languages, and they kind of say, whoa, I don't know if I could say that to a prospect. You can say anything to a prospect, particularly when they're not getting back to you, just so long as it's not offensive or rude or impolite. All right, that's it. They are the 7 ones that I wanted to cover with you. Let me just go back and put those into summary format so you can see them there. Let's do this, and I need to play that. There you go. There's the 7 of them. No, you're not seeing that for some reason. There you go. There's the 7 of them. So the first one is push out the deal. And I said there was a version of that which was to kind of look, I'm leaving at the end of the month kind of thing as well, which is also works to the same thing. As other words, people don't want that messiness, want it tidied up. Mutual action plan, structured, project managers, those 5 elements of go live date, milestones, tasks, roles and responsibilities, risks and assumptions. Every project manager knows those, like 2 + 2. Apply law of scarcity. Again, if you want to give discount, don't call it a discount. Give it something that can't be replicated like a discount, and kind of give everybody first refusal. Quantify the cost of delay. Harder to do later in the game. It's easier. It should have been done. But if you have it already and you can turn it into, rather than the cost of the problem, you just reframe it into the cost of a weekly, daily delay. Just changes the tone of it completely. Detach from the outcome. That's more for your own mental game, but don't discount how important that is, both in terms of how you played, but also how they respond to you. Next one was have a mobile defense plan, which was have those 3 stages and know what you're going to do at each stage. Really important. That'll hold the line on price, and mean that even if you do give some concessions, it mean wherever you end up will be better than if you just had one line only. And then the last one was when somebody's gone dark, incommunicado, how to smoke them out is to send them an email like that. They're the 7 I wanted to cover with you. I'm now going to go just quickly check the Q&A, if there's anything in there that I wanted to cover. Okay, Paul is muted. Okay, that's going back a bit. We got that. No audio. Mike, okay. Will this webinar be distributed? It'll be sent to everybody who is on this call, that's for sure. Yeah, would love the concessions preparation. I will do that as well. Do you know what I'll do? Rather than just, I have the list of everybody who's on this call. I'll send it to everybody. If you don't want it, just delete it. But that's easier than me trying to remember who asked and who didn't ask it. So I'll certainly do that for Luca, no problem. Let's see what we have. Thanks, Paul. Good stuff. Would you be able to send us a sheet? Yeah, I'll certainly do that. As I said, I'll send it to everybody. That's almost it. I think I wanted to... Oh yeah, there was one last thing I wanted to do. It does bother me year on year that when I see these Q4 and everything is so short term, right? And these are my little Christmas friends. And but everything is so short term. And I think, yeah, you got to deal with it. But long term is important as well, and this is something, oh, by the way, this is just my excuse. This is something 7 years ago. I bought a cask in Dingle Distillery, and I waited. Christmas came, Christmas went. Christmas came, Christmas went. I went through 6 Q4s waiting for this thing, and finally it came through early last year, and I said, I had about 250 bottles. I sold 240 of them, I kept 10 back. They went for, it's only a 6-year-old whiskey, went for €150. That's what you get when you wait. And I said I was going to open one of these every Christmas. I've only got 6 of them left. Because this is my last webinar of Q4. And I want to wish you guys a happy Christmas and a prosperous New Year and a fantastic Q4. And I want to drink to your good health. Sláinte. I waited a year for that. Take care, folks. Have a great Christmas.